How are y'all doing? Thanks for coming today to our special meeting. We always start the meeting with the pledge and the prayer, so I'm going to recognize Chairman Stamps to do the pledge,
Okay.
and then Bob Odom to do the prayer.
Would everyone please stand? Attention, salute, pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
I think the mic up front there is hot.
Yes. Let us pray. Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your mercy and grace that's extended to us every day. We thank you for your Son, our Lord Jesus. Father, we ask your forgiveness of our sins. Father, we ask you to bless this commission and everyone in this room, that all our minds and hearts may be clear and sound for everything that's said and done here today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, brother. The purpose of the meeting today is to basically just to give information that TVA had in their report, and also TVPPA in their findings in their report. So again, it's not to accuse anybody or to throw rocks at anybody. It's just to point out the facts. And so it's good to have some of my legislative colleagues here. Representative Faulkner up front from Holly Springs. We also have Senator Chisholm. And I saw a couple in the back, hiding in the back, Representative Powell and Representative Massengill. So it's good to have y'all. Good to have the local EPAs with us. We're partners. We're all partners in this to help serve our constituents and the ratepayers of Mississippi. So that's our ultimate goal. And I know that us three are united in that effort in the whole state to make sure that the ratepayer is taken care of, and that we as a group, as a unified party or unified group, try to provide the best service that we can to those that live within the borders of the state. So that's our commitment, and this is just part of that, to try to bring attention to what's going on so we can help find solutions together. So with that, no further ado, we're going to start with TVA. We're going to recognize Ms. Melanie Farrell. Farrell's right? Yeah, Melanie Farrell to go over the TVA report.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to all three for inviting us to be here today. So happy to be here. Hopefully my volume will be good. So again, I'm Melanie Farrell, Vice President of External Stakeholder and Regulatory Oversight for TVA. And what I'll review with you today is really a recap of the last year or so of our engagement with the Holly Springs Utility Department. So before I dive in, just a bit of background and context about TVA. So Tennessee Valley Authority was created in 1933 with the intention to make lives better with our enduring mission of serving the people of the valley. To meet the energy needs of the valley, TVA generates power from a diverse generation portfolio and works in partnership with 153 local power companies like Holly Springs, who deliver that power to more than 10 million people across 7 states and some 700,000 businesses and industries. And I want to acknowledge and thank many of our Mississippi local power companies who are here present today, certainly interested and supportive of finding a solution to the path forward in Holly Springs. So today I'm going to talk about TVA's regulatory authority, our priorities for the utility department, and actions we have taken to try and get Holly Springs back into regulatory compliance. And one point I want to make that's important before I dive in is that everything I'm sharing with you today has been shared with Holly Springs leadership, whether it be in-person meetings, virtual meetings, phone calls, etc. So this was really just a recap. Education, as you mentioned. So let me talk about public power and local control. So TVA's role as regulator is important to the Valley's public power model. Public power means that TVA is not obligated to investors or to make a profit. Instead, our focus is on generating reliable, low-cost electricity for all of the people in our region. TVA exercises regulatory oversight of several aspects for our local power companies, financial health, and their service practices. But each local power company served by TVA is responsible for managing its own electric system. How an LPC carries out that responsibility is largely a matter of local decision-making and local accountability of the LPC's particular governing body. As a part of operating and maintaining an electric distribution system, every local power company should be prepared to respond to storm events, outages, properly maintain their electric distribution system to ultimately provide safe, reliable power to its customers. Truly, public power exists to serve local communities with safe and reliable power. Part of the longstanding success of the public power model is due to local control and the ability for each local power company to make decisions that are in the best interest of all their customers. So let me focus a minute on specifically our scope as regulators of our local power companies. So first, the full authority of what we regulate is set forth in our wholesale power contract. It includes authority to set wholesale power rates and review and approve retail rates to ensure rates are low as feasible. We ensure non-discrimination within customer rate classes, basically ensuring fairness of rates and how service is provided. We ensure appropriate use of electric system revenues. So for systems such as Holly Springs, which is a municipal, ensuring electric system revenues are used for the good of the electric system. We monitor the financial health of local power companies by review of their annual financial reports, the receipt of an external audit report, as well as monthly financial reports, which contain calculation of monthly financial metrics that our team reviews. We monitor the joint use of assets between electric and non-electric business operations, such as water, sewer, sanitation, etc., through a joint cost study and a joint cost agreement that helps prevent cross-subsidization and maintain low electric rates. We also review local power companies' rules and regulations to ensure that they are consistent with TVA's adopted service practice standards. So specifically for Holly Springs, and I'm going to get into after this slide a bit of a timeline to kind of recap where we've been, but this slide highlights kind of the priorities that we have been focused on to help improve the condition of the utility system. First and foremost, the goal of public power and a top priority for TVA and all of our local power companies is to ensure all of our ratepayers have safe, reliable, and resilient power. Our goal has been and remains to be to partner with Holly Springs Utility Department so they are able to safely provide power to those they serve and are able to operate the electric system in a financially sound and self-sustaining manner. To do this, we continue to reach out to city leadership to discuss the areas of non-compliance that we have found, which I will speak to in a moment, and what actions need to be taken to ensure compliance with the wholesale power contract. One concern we have that we continue to reiterate since the storm recovery report, which I will get to, is the utility has been without a qualified general manager or leader of the utility department for over a year. It's very concerning that that position is vacant. Typically, TVA would be working with the general manager of a utility to address concerns as we have with Holly Springs. So to not have that has been, to continue to not have that has been of great concern and a point that we reiterate the significance of to city leadership. So although our efforts to help Holly Springs thus far have largely been unaccepted, we continue to stand ready to help them find ways to better serve their customers. Safe and reliable power is a top priority at TVA and to those we serve. We want to partner with Holly Springs to ensure the ratepayers have safe and reliable power. All right, let me move to the next slide. So this is a high-level timeline. And let me just first start by saying Holly Springs has been a customer of TVA since 1935. So long-standing customer, became a long-term partner in 2019, signing a long-term 20-year agreement, which the majority of our local power companies have signed. Holly Springs, however, even with that, and the time period starts between 2012 to 19, has had a long-standing challenge of cyclical in nature, if you will, challenges to stay in regulatory compliance with our wholesale power contract. I actually have been at TVA my entire career. I joined our regulatory team leading it in 2020. And when I joined the team, one of the first kind of highlights they shared with me is that they were attending a celebration in Holly Springs because after years of engagement, they had worked with the local leaders at that time, the utility leaders, to get the utility back into compliance. And that stuck out with me. Little did I know a lot would change since the summer of 2020. So leadership changes occurred in Holly Springs in the summer of 21, and at that point, the utility again began to show challenges in submitting required financial information to TVA. So then, fast forward to the spring of 2022, April, there was a severe storm that came through, caused significant damage to the system. And at that time, TVA, our regulatory program, has what we call a complaint resolution process. So if you're not happy with your local power company, we have a number to call and to raise that concern to TVA. And following that April event, weather event, TVA received numerous, unprecedented number of complaints from the ratepayers of Holly Springs with concerns about how long it was taking to restore power, and specifically suggesting that there was discriminatory practices in how power was restored. Well, non-discrimination, ensuring non-discrimination is part of our regulatory scope, and because of that, that summer or shortly thereafter, we engaged in a review of the information that was made available to us about how power restoration was done during that event, to ultimately look and assess if those accusations were true. So because of challenges with obtaining information, it took some period of time, but in January of 23, so a year ago, we were preparing to issue a report that summarized our findings from that April event. And on January 31st of last year, so interestingly enough, we're here on the date exactly a year from when significant ice storm came through the entire area of North Mississippi, or in the region, but it caused significant damage to the Holly Springs Utility Department. The event was a 2-day weather event, if you recall, and it took over a week, if not close to 2, for ultimately all of the citizens to have their power restored. And that was after bringing MEMA in to be involved in leadership, leaning heavily on neighboring local power companies and leaders who stepped in to help lead that recovery effort. But at that point, from the extent of condition that we learned of through that effort, TVA took a step we had not done before, which was to actually prepare a report that we issued to the city leadership in March of that year that identified not only areas of what was within directly our scope, but also operational issues, which are, again, typically they fall under that is local control, right? Operational issues, local decision-making. But there were so many issues and examples of safety concerns, just the overall condition of the system. Again, at that point, they were without a general manager. We felt obligated to put this in a format that could be shared for city leadership to ultimately act on. I will note that between the storm event of that April initiating storm and then the January event, TVA received over 2,200 complaints, which is 5 times what we normally receive from all 153 LPCs in a given year. So a significant number of customers were calling TVA directly, asking for us to help, to get involved, to express their concerns. So we've issued the report in March that contained I'll say, the initial findings of that event itself. We also initiated at that time a full regulatory compliance assessment. So beginning in March, April of that year, our team initiated an assessment where we went in, worked directly with utility department staff, really getting into the financials of the utility because of what had transpired and been learned through the storm event. We were concerned really about the financial health and stability of the utility system. That took us several months to complete in being able to obtain the data that we had. But by the August-September timeframe with the completed report, we have identified several concerns, and I'll get a bit more to that in a coming slide, but shared that with city leadership in that September timeframe, identifying just general concerns with areas that are directly out of compliance with our terms in the wholesale power contract that we have, but also general concern about the utility's ability to operate on a financially self-sustaining manner. This was shared individually with the alderman in Holly Springs and the mayor, and then publicly at one of their city meetings. I'm going to quickly move from this slide, but I do want to highlight, and following me today, you'll hear from leadership with TVPPA, Tennessee Valley Public Power Authority. A key, I think, success of the last year was their work funded by appropriations from the state, but their work with the utility department to do a full system assessment to really give a better picture of the condition and what needs to be done to help course correct and get the utility headed in a better direction. So I'll just mention that was a significant, I think, accomplishment that was done last year, and looking forward for Doug and Tom to share that. So quickly, I've mentioned these kind of in the timeline view. I'll hit these relatively fast and certainly saved a little bit of time for questions. So the storm recovery report that we issued in that March timeframe, really again following unprecedented number of complaints. You know, the primary findings that we had in the report, there were 11 factors we outlined that contributed to the prolonged period of power restoration, and we offered 14 areas for improvement that we thought were critical for the utility's ability to get back to serving its customers with safe and reliable power. We made the report available on our external website, but again, I just want to mention, top of our list was the recommendation in that March 2023 timeframe that the utility department really needs an experienced leader to help it develop a plan to improve its performance in the long term. At this point, we have provided that. I have no, we've not gotten a formal response from the utility department, and don't have any real evidence to show that much has been done with what we provided. I mentioned the regulatory compliance assessment. So again, after that initial operational kind of natured review of the storm response, our team launched into the regulatory compliance assessment, really evaluating Holly Springs' compliance with the wholesale power contract which is between the city of Holly Springs and TVA. The current financial conditions raise serious concerns about the electric department's ability to continue to operate and maintain the system on a self-supporting and financially sound basis. Shared, we met individually with the alderman and the mayor to go over these requirements. I will note that the alderman took an action following our sharing of this report with the board to identify 2 of the 5 aldermen to serve as lead points of contact to work with TVA to ultimately put an agreement in place that will outline how the utility will correct and address the issues that we have identified, most importantly, where they are out of compliance with our contract. At this point, our team has had initial conversations kind of late in the calendar year with those aldermen. Still work to be done, and we are working towards that. Working towards having an agreement again in place to give us assurances that the utility will get back, committed to get back into regulatory compliance with us. So financial reporting, if you've watched any of the city meetings or any of our prior TVA presentations, one of our big concerns has been with the lack of accurate financial information being provided to us, which is required by the wholesale power contract to TVA. They're delinquent on providing external audit reports where monthly reports are provided. It is typical that it's inaccurate or incorrect information. They are 3 years delinquent, actually, on the external audit reports. The FY21 report, and here we are in 24, the FY21 report, external audit report, has not been submitted, and FY22 and 23 have not begun. The annual report, which is a report that the utility would provide directly to TVA for FY23, was due on August 15th of last year, and we have not received it thus far. Based on all of this and what we have been able to review and understand from limited information on the financial side of the utility, we are really concerned that they are in a position to not be able to cover their expenses for the long run. And so we're really concerned about the viability of the utility, financial viability. Highlights, let me talk quickly about the status of the appropriated funds that came from the state of Mississippi. So last session, the legislature appropriated $500,000 to TVA to assist Holly Springs with two primary focus areas. One is a complete system assessment, which was conducted by TVPPA, and glad they're going to be able to talk about that today. The other was, or the other portion was for right-of-way maintenance. So the process, our team, our legal team, worked with the state to establish a way by which the money will be transferred, a bit of the administrative side. We have established that process. We have made that process available through multiple communications to the city leadership, and at this point, they have not pursued that with us in terms of that additional funding that is available for right-of-way maintenance. So where are we from a enforcement standpoint, if you will? So as I have mentioned, we are TVA, very committed to our mission, and we're going to continue to try to work with and engage with the city leadership and others towards establishing a compliance agreement and ultimately working to put Holly Springs on a path where it can be led and managed in a financially sound and self-sustaining manner. Where there are clear violations of our wholesale power contract where they are out of compliance, we will continue to evaluate the enforcement mechanisms that we have available to us. We have hired an experienced utility accountant at the expense of Holly Springs to assist the utility in getting their financials in order so we can have a clearer picture of where they stand from a financial standpoint. And we're going to continue to engage the aldermen and the city leaders, but those aldermen that have been identified as the leads to work with us on developing a new compliance agreement. So we will continue that effort to work towards that ultimate deliverable. Okay, so I'll just conclude with kind of going back to where I started. So our goal has been, remains to be a partner to Holly Springs so that they are able to safely provide power to those they serve and are able to operate the electric system in a financially sound and self-sustaining manner. Although our offers have largely been unaccepted by the city leadership, we continue to stand ready to help them find ways to better serve their customers. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you for your presentation. Gentlemen?
I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, and again, I want to again reiterate, this is not beat up on the utility district. It's to really get down to why are we having these failures and what can we do to try to help make these ratepayers not go through what they're going through. And I cannot stress that enough. I mean, I know it came to us at the end of last session because of this ice storm. Ice storm really kind of brought it to the forefront to a lot of us that don't live up there. I live close, but I didn't know really that it was as big an issue as it is because I live in Monroe County. So again, it's to make sure that everybody understands what's going on so we can try to figure out to help those people. This is not about, we can't regulate it. We don't want to regulate it, but we do have to we do owe it to those constituents and those ratepayers in that area to make sure that they are getting the power and the service that they deserve. And that's all this is. And I appreciate your report and efforts to work with the utility district and just, again, being an advocate for those people in that area and for all the people. This is not one side against the other. It's about the ratepayer. So how do we as a group help the ratepayer? And again, I appreciate your presentation. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, ma'am. Is there someone from the city here? Is there an alderman, a mayor, or
I've not seen.
someone who wants to keep the utility? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner?
You said this has been going on since 2012. We've been going down. It seems like they got a little better at one time. Sad. That's all I can say. Very sad. They deserve our best. And that's not being provided. Is there any legislators, senators from that area that would like to say something?
Go ahead. Just so everybody knows, it's Senator Chisholm from that area. But you help actually in New Albany.
I'd like to thank the three of you for putting this together, addressing this problem. This has been an ongoing problem for a long time. One of my mayors is in Benton County, and that's where their power comes from, in Ashland. And I have gotten numerous calls. I have spent, during ice storms, I've been up there and traveled the streets on the slick streets, which are dangerous, and people without power. And there was no workers to be found. I go to the mayor and I said, why do we not have workers over here from Holly Springs? He said, oh, we do. Go to the cemetery and you'll find them. They go over there and sit. So we have a really big issue there. It's more so than what we're just seeing with our naked eyes. I've spent many hours over there traveling. I have called the governor at one time to get some warming tents set up, food trucks sent in because there was no food. We had like 600 elderly people just in Ashland that were without power for days. And it was so cold, they had no heat. The ones that had electricity, their food was ruining, so they had no food. Food trucks are set up to feed these people. And this day and time, we shouldn't have an issue like this in our state. And it has been going on for years, and they fought it. And I just want to let you know a few of the things that are going on over there.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Senator. TVPPA report will show some of that. Representative Faulkner? And again, this is not to try to, the city of Holly Springs is I met with some of the linemen and things over the summer. They're doing their best. One of their linemen is, how old is Mr. Humphreys? How old is Mr. Humphreys?
82.
He's in his 80s, and he's one of the, I think, 4 or 5 linemen that they have. And he actually came up and he spoke, and he was apologetic. He said, we as a utility district, and he was talking about the whole city and group, we are fighting to do better. And again, it's not to beat up on Mr. Humphreys or the city. They just don't have the tools to do to be able to fix it, and that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of, and that's what the TVPPA report does show as well, is that just the status of the system. Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for this hearing today, and everybody that's here, and thank you to TVA for the report. If I could just add a few things, I don't want to say too much. I think that is well documented about the issues that's happening in Holly Springs. Commissioner, when you were my colleague in the House of Representatives, we had a few town hall meetings last year, and we spoke about that there in Holly Springs. And one thing that was pointed out by TVA, I think, was that even though we have issues now what's happening right now in Holly Springs has never really happened before. So I don't want the narrative to be this has been going on for 20 years or 15 years. That's not the case. There's always challenges, and I probably could find that across the board in any area. But what we're seeing in Holly Springs is something quite different. And so I do certainly agree that we have to do better. I think that, again, there are employees who's doing the best that they can do. I think under this current administration, they have been met with quite a few challenges, as you heard in the report. But there's an old saying we use, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just change the water and keep the baby. So I don't want us to, I'm glad we're here today, and I'm hoping we can come to some type of, put our heads together, come up with some type of resolution for this problem. But I hope we don't make a hasty decision based on what's happening right now. But we do need to keep the ratepayers and the customers that we serve in mind. I just start answering the question you have, but I just stop right there.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate your input. And again, I look forward to working with you over the summer. You were great help over the summer, and I know you're an advocate for that, for the people in that district and for that system. So thank you, Representative Faulkner. Melanie, I do have one or two questions. Sorry. Just for clarity, does TVA regulate daily operations of their local power companies?
No,
Yeah.
we do not. We do not. That's really, as I mentioned, that local decision-making. I mean, we pride ourselves in that because I think every leader of local power companies knows how best to operate and maintain their system, and that is the role of the local power company.
And we don't either, really. So again, this is a way to try to show again what's going on and try to figure out solutions, because y'all don't regulate and we don't either.
Right.
As a commission. But out of the 153 power companies in the Tennessee Valley, in the 7 states, how many of you had this type of issues with?
None. This is, we're in uncharted territory. We have never experienced this type of situation specifically on the operational side. I mean, there have been others with financial challenges, but the concerns that have been identified with just the condition of the system, safety concerns on the system. You mentioned the lineman. The system of this size and the area it covers, to only have, as I understand it, 4, 5 linemen is not adequate. And it's I feel for those that are doing their best to keep the system. But no, we've never experienced or seen this type of situation with any of our other local power companies.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions for the lady, gentlemen? And you're echoing what Representative Faulkner said. I mean, this is, this has really come to a boiling point over the last couple of years. And so haven't been able to get a lot of reports, haven't been able to have that interaction with the leadership on the ground to try to figure out this situation. That's what's got us here, really, is that we don't have a path forward with where we're at this point. And so, again, thank you for your presentation, and we'll move on. Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to, we're going to recognize Doug Peters with TVPPA and Tom Suggs as well to present their report. And again, this report was commissioned by the legislature, and if you'll just state your position, Mr. Peters, and what you do, but the state paid for this report to try to assess the condition of that system. Mr. Peters.
My name is Doug Peters. I'm the president and CEO of TVPPA. I think because we are a very different kind of organization, I think it is important to provide just a little context for who we are. And then I'm going to provide a little context for how we got involved, which started basically last March. And then I will ask Tom Suggs to come up, and I'll explain who he is and the role that he has played in this assessment. And I do want to emphasize Melanie's answer to you, and I would like to provide a little more context on operational oversight. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Let me tell you who TVPPA is, Tennessee Valley Public Power Association. We were formed in 1946 by what today we would call the 153 local power companies. If you go back to the genesis of TVA, in 1933, you will find that TVA is prohibited by federal law from lobbying Congress on its own behalf. There is no prohibition, though, for its customers to lobby Congress for public power issues specific to TVA. So the genesis for our organization, and if you know anything about TVA's history, even from 33 to 46 and in several years later, or several subsequent years, TVA had a lot of challenges in terms of remaining the federal agency that it is and has become today. So we were pretty involved, even though I got some gray hair. I do not go back quite that far. TVPPA was pretty involved in the whole idea of the regulatory and public power model that exists in the Tennessee Valley today. In one sense, we are a traditional trade association. We have an extensive education and training program in all areas of utility operations, maintenance, finance, and accounting, safety, executive, supervisory training, all targeted to local power positions. So that's kind of the basis for our expertise. And we do that through a collection of actually former member employees that we think have the right expertise, the right capabilities, and it has served the membership very, very well, the education and training program. To that, we add an insurance company, we have conferences. We are a traditional trade association in that. What makes us a little unique is you're probably aware the Tennessee Valley is not vertically integrated. TVA is a generation and transmission federal agency. My 153 members are independent from TVA. So in many cases over the years, we have been the collective voice of the 153 advocating with TVA and advocating in DC and sometimes even in state situations like this. So that makes us a little unique in terms of the role that we play. We got involved, TVPPA got involved, as Melanie just said, coming out of the storm that occurred a year ago today, with her presentation to the Board of Aldermen in early to mid-March last year. And in preparing for that, Melanie called me and said, there are financial issues here, there are tremendous operational issues. What could TVPPA do to improve, to fix, to bring about change from an operations and maintenance standpoint? And this is where I want to go back to your question, Commissioner Brown. TVA doesn't look at operational issues. That falls under a general concept that we call local control. And I want to emphasize the fact that I have 153 members and only one is in this situation. It has occurred over time. As Commissioner Carr pointed out, sometime over the last 10 years. But as the representative said, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't want to do anything that calls into question the operational and maintenance integrity of my 152 other members. Several member managers are in the room. They're my boss, and if I don't defend them and tell their story, I'm going to hear about it from them. And it's a story that I'm happy to tell because it's a great story. They do a great job, and we only see this in this one instance. And it has emerged over a relatively recent period of time. So when Melanie called me and said, what can TVPPA do? Well, she doesn't have any operational metrics to go by. It certainly doesn't have, TVA doesn't have any operational authority, if you will, and as Commissioner Brown, as you indicated, it's a little silent even in state law. So I said, well, Melanie, I don't know what to tell you in terms of helping Holly Springs fix itself because I don't know what's wrong. somebody needs to go in and do a full-blown operational and maintenance assessment and find out, you know, what they do well and where their weaknesses are. To that end, we developed a plan. We took well-established operational and maintenance criteria developed by the American Public Power Association more than 2 decades ago by the APPA is the national organization that represents municipals. And so they put this criteria together as a way to help their members understand what, I'm not even sure what the right word is. It's more than appropriate. What good operations and maintenance practices are. And this was developed, again, by municipals for the entire membership of APPA. So we use that as the background for our assessment. We also found, and I'm going to give you just a brief introduction to Tom Suggs, and I want you to make sure you understand, even if you want to question him, we used him as the primary assessor for this work that we did. Tom is the recently retired Chief Operating Officer of Middle Tennessee Electric, a cooperative, but he used this municipally developed criteria, and Tom is a 35, 40-year experienced electrical engineer. His most recent position, as I said, was Chief Operating Officer for Middle Tennessee Electric. And Middle Tennessee Electric has today 340,000 meters. To the best of my understanding, Holly Springs has 12. So I just want you to understand, he has the operational background and experience to provide an objective assessment. So as we started our process with Holly Springs, we wanted to follow what I think would be easily recognized as sound assessment process. We started with identifying the criteria we were going to use. We found the right expertise to use that criteria, and then we went in and had an entrance meeting with the mayor and 2 aldermen and said, we're going to come in on this day. This is the criteria we're going to use. This is what we're going to look at, so that there are no surprises. And Tom's going to say this too, but I want to say it just so you understand very clearly. We said very definitively, we're not looking for what happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We just want to know what the weaknesses are and how to move forward. We're not looking, you know, to play gotcha with anybody. And that was our approach. We started that, I believe, sometime in early September last year, maybe right at the first of the month. We finished our field work by mid-September. It took us a couple of weeks to actually put the data together. And then we set up an exit meeting with the mayor and the 2 aldermen. And, well, I'm not even sure the aldermen were there in the exit meeting. But we presented our findings to them, at least in a summary fashion, in early November. And to date, that has been the sum total of our involvement. We think we put together a comprehensive review of their operations and maintenance, but it is, I say comprehensive. We looked in all the right areas, but if you've read the report, and as you've indicated you have, I want you to understand what we found. There are other examples of those weaknesses. We did not try to enumerate 1,000 different things that have to be corrected. We picked highlights and said, in this area, here's, you know, this is an indicator of why we think this is a weakness. So I just want you to understand the context of what you've read. And with that, I want to say just one final time, because I think it is important, the model, the regulatory model that TVA implements in conjunction with my members has served us very, very well for a very long time. This is an anomaly, and we need to fix the anomaly, but we don't need to do anything that calls into question the integrity of the other 152. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions for me. And then when Tom comes up there, he's gonna give you a pretty detailed summary of what we found. So anything from me?
I would agree with what you're saying. Public Service Commission, we don't know the operations either. You know, we're kind of 40,000-foot view, so we're in the same boat as TVA. We don't want to regulate it. We don't want to run it. So we appreciate your work to kind of show us what is actually going on.
I started my career in the electric utility industry in 1983 working for TVA in their nuclear program. I worked for TVA up until '01, and then I've been with TVPPA since. And my experience with TVPPA, I am not a distribution engineer, but over these last 23 years, through our education and safety work, we have developed a relationship with a pretty broad cadre of expertise, and that allowed us to do this. And depending on what comes out of this, I think we could be an asset to TVA or the Public Service Commission to bring operational perspectives and expertise to bear, again, such that we fix Holly Springs on a going forward basis.
Gentlemen, you'll have heard the Mr. Peters' presentation. Any questions? Representative Carr, you recognized.
I want to clear up something. I don't know if there's a misunderstanding. I wasn't talking about the other co-ops.
Oh, I didn't think so.
Yeah, okay.
But this is, there's a
Because
lot
they're-
of people listening,
Yes.
and I just want to make sure that I said very succinctly, and I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
never took that,
Yeah,
but I just wanted kind of on the record that we have 153 and there's only one that is in this situation.
yeah,
So thank you for that.
yeah. I just want to clear that up.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
We're only looking at this one area. I want y'all to understand that. I think I speak for the other commissioners. We're only focusing on one area right now. We have a microscope out,
Yeah.
so that's what we're looking at.
Again, I appreciate that. It's,
Okay.
we have a model here that has served the Tennessee Valley very, very well. And I just want to make sure we, as you just said, we look at this with a microscope or with a rifle and not a shotgun. You know,
Yes.
that's the way I think about it.
And I appreciate what you said. We're not playing gotcha either. I mean, this is not a gotcha, and this is not throwing rocks or blaming John, or blaming anybody. It's to say this is an issue, and thank you for identifying the issues. Then we can corporately try to figure out how we go forward.
One final, oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Stamps.
I did also want to clarify something. Even though we're not trying to play gotcha, we don't want the ratepayers inside the city or outside the city to continue to suffer with bad conditions and bad electricity and another day longer. I know I got 95 cities in my district, and so do you all have other things to be doing and taking care of. So I do want to get to a point of resolve as expeditiously as possible. You know, I've watched these videos that were on Facebook in preparation for this meeting, and it's just disheartening when you see bad governance. And so even though we're just collecting information, I do want to get to a point of making a decision as expeditiously as possible.
We couldn't agree more. I will make one final comment, because Tom's going to make this as well. Having just tried to be very specific about 152 versus 1, within that 1, with respect to the employees, those are well-intentioned employees. We've just heard it said. That was certainly our experience. Tom's going to talk about this. The employees want to do better. They know they need to do better. But Commissioner Brown, as you said, they're lacking some resources that keep them from doing that. And the key to this is try to figure out how to get the right resources, how to get the right leadership, how to get the right expertise in such that we can provide my members focus on the ratepayers. So ultimately, if I take care of my members, I'm taking care of ratepayers, and that's our goal. That's public power.
Commissioner Stamps, I agree 100% that with what we heard so far, it's a total lack of response from the city leadership at this point. I mean, it seems, anyway, our resolve, again, as Commissioner Stamp said, is for the ratepayers, and the ratepayers are suffering. So we want to try to resolve that as quick as we can, and I appreciate your efforts to bring it to light.
We're happy to do it.
Thanks.
I'm assuming you're gonna call Tom up next.
Yes.
He is the expert.
Yeah, you can introduce him because you know all of his credentials, so I'm going to allow you to recognize Tom to come up and present the
I
TVA.
do have a doubly, you know, at the undergraduate level. I am not the engineer that Tom is. He is extremely well qualified, extremely well recognized by the membership on both municipal and cooperative side in terms of his capability of doing this. So we were very fortunate to secure his service, and I don't think we could have found, we could have found one or two that were as good, but we wouldn't have found anybody better than Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Next, we'll have recognize Mr. Tom Suggs. He's former CEO of Middle Tennessee Electric, and the way I understand, you were lead on the TVPPA report that we have in front of us.
Yes, sir, that is
Thank you.
correct.
You're recognized.
Excuse me. And I just want to mention that while I was at Middle Tennessee Electric for 25 years, my job prior to that was at Natchez Trace EPA here in Mississippi. I had the same role for 13 years here in Mississippi. So I'm a Mississippi guy, Mississippi State engineer. So I'm going to repeat what's been repeated several times here, but I think it's necessary. It's not my intent to bash either, to bash the city or the employees, but my comments are going to be much more pointed and direct, and so.
You're at liberty, gentlemen, so just let us know what you found.
Yeah, and so I feel like I need to say again, they're not directed at personality, they're directed at problems here. So, you know, the unique nature of this assessment just makes it necessary. They didn't send me in there to find what's working, right? They sent me in there to see where are the problems. And this is not an exhaustive list that I'm going to go through. I'm going to go through it into a lot of detail. It's concerning to me as an engineer. I think it will be concerning to you as a body, everybody in this room. We've talked a lot about the reliability aspect of this. There's a safety component of this that is also critical. It's at a critical level, I think. It causes me great concern for the employees there. So, excuse me. So as I start going into this, I'm going to lift some comments that I have directly from the report, but I'll be adding some flavor to some of that as we go through. And I do want to say that all of the information that I'm going to present was either observed directly by me, or there were two safety specific guys that went in and did an assessment, some of their information, or firsthand communications with employees or city leaders. If there's something that I mention that does not meet those criteria, I will point that out. But everything is firsthand here, okay? Are the slides loaded? Okay.
Sorry for that wall there. It kind of makes it harder, doesn't it?
Boy, it does.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna need to use this. Okay, I'm gonna start out with some visuals, okay? I'm not gonna do my real presentation from this, but I just want to show some things. And the way this process unfolded, actually on my drive to Holly Springs, I stopped the car and started taking pictures. I was seeing things immediately that caused me concern. You've got, all of these pictures are in the report. All the pictures that are in the report are not in this presentation, but I could have taken hundreds more, okay? Just understand that. I will point out a few of these for you to kind of keep in the back of your mind as I get into other items there. Hopefully that will work. Where have I point? There we go. There we go. And so one of the first polls I saw was this one. This is right outside of a substation, the South Holly Springs substation. Vegetation is obvious. There's two circuits on this pole. There's also, it's hard to see, but down toward the middle there, you'll see a little bit of orange. there is a device in there that they used a temporary jumper to repair something a year, 2 years ago, they told me. It's supposed to be a temporary repair. That thing, I told them when I went in, I said, that's going to cause y'all problems. Little did I know that before I left, the next week, we had, there we go, they had an outage there. And it took 4 hours. It was a beautiful, clear day. It took 4 hours. The office was affected. The Holly Springs Utility office was affected. I was in the office working with some of the ladies inside, and the power goes out. No generator at the office, so they could not get the office back up and running. The repair that they made was just to replace that jumper. They didn't. The vegetation is still there. I mean, that's the mindset is day to day, do what you can. So that was interesting to me. That one of the first things I saw actually caused an outage. There was an outage every day that I was there, and there was not a cloud any of the days I was there. They were working outages every day.
How many days were you there?
Sir?
How many days were you there?
I was there for about 7 days, and I was there at 7 o'clock in the morning with the crews when they got to work, and I went out with them to different places, and so I was with them on those days.
So excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. How did they service a pole with vegetation already on it? Just lift trucks? There's no way to climb that pole.
Bucket truck.
Bucket trucks.
If you can get to it.
Well, and that was a challenge there. There was kudzu everywhere and a big hole, but they did it. Yeah. Just a couple of shots here, just of general vegetation type things. This one was interesting to me because it was in the city, and this is actually a switch pole that you would use to isolate during outages. The switches are covered. I mean, there's no way to access that for it to perform its intended function. Again, just general vegetation-related issues everywhere I went. And I'll say this, and I may repeat it later, but I never got off of a main highway. Highway 178, 407, I never had to turn down a side road to find something. I actually had employees say, we want you to go to a certain place we're going to take you that's really bad. We never could get around to going because the days we were supposed to go, they had outages, they had to work. So I don't even know what they consider bad. But these were bad enough, and they certainly, I think, tell a story that there are vegetation challenges on the Holly Springs system. Kudzu is prevalent. I don't know how it's staying on at all. I'll be honest with you. This one's got a transformer on it. This vegetation is in direct contact with energized conductors. Not only you have vegetation, you'll get critters, that crawl up in this stuff. There's just so many opportunities for bad things to happen here. That one, almost like a monument to kudzu. Another one with transformer on it. So the next 2 or 3 here, you'll notice the poles look a little different. This is subtransmission. This is 46 kV. And Holly Springs owns some, and I'm going to talk about that in some detail in a little bit. Even the 46 kV is starting to see vegetation. You can't really tell so much, or I can't from this screen. It looks better on the bigger screen, but that wire disappears into the trees at the 46,000 volts. It is what it looks like. So I'm going to spend a good bit of time on vegetation management here shortly. Let's transition now. This was interesting to me. When I walked into the North Holly Springs substation, first of all, there's not supposed to be any vegetation, but that's a minor issue at this one. You'll notice that transformer, and you'll notice that structure to the left of the transformer, and you can see some stuff laying on the ground there. What we have here is a situation where over 5 years ago, there was an explosion. And this transformer was damaged. It's still out of service. one of the two transformers that were in that station is still out of service.
How many years?
Over 5.
I had a question. Can you go back?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What's the availability of that transformer?
No idea. Don't know what the condition is, don't know if it was ever tested. It certainly cannot be put back in service right now. Even if the transformer were, the structure would have to be rebuilt. And, yeah, I don't know. They have one other transformer in that station that is, you know, serving the entire load, but it's all on that one transformer now. And just to speak to housekeeping and safety and different things a little bit, I mean, this is where the pieces off of that structure, I assume, fell 5 years ago, and they're still there.
That's the fuses?
One in front of the door, which I assume is being used for a doorstop.
That's the fuses.
That's the fuses, he said?
So now transitioning a little bit differently, because I'm going to speak to all of this in detail. I just want to provide some visuals to get you thinking. There's not supposed to be vegetation in a substation, okay? This was the South Holly Springs substation, I believe. This is a shared substation between TVA and Holly Springs. So standing where I'm standing right there, I'm looking into the Holly Springs part of this substation. I then turned 180 degrees and took a picture from that same location into the TVA. You see the difference. So this is also in that same station. These are energized 13,000 volt breakers with vegetation that can, you know, harbor, it's fire hazard. It can harbor rodents that attract other things in there that you don't want in the substation. Just for comparison, what an appropriately maintained substation should look like. A couple of other pictures of appropriately maintained substations. These are not Holly Springs substations. This picture, the next couple of pictures, I'll elaborate on this some more too, but I wanted to show it. There's 4 transformers in this station that are old TVA substation transformers. I couldn't determine the age from the nameplate. Looking at them, probably 60 years old. And I noticed these labels on the gauges where you monitor the winding temperature and the oil temperature and the things that you need to keep up with. This was one of the other transformers. It's the same way. Here's what it says. You know, so no idea of the condition, the loading, any of that. And I'll speak more to that in a moment also. Again, just wanting to kind of show the visuals.
Obviously, this is a safety concern at that point.
Yeah. It's all kind of concerns. Reliability, safety. Yes, sir. More vegetation. In some of the stations outside of the city, the vegetation is even worse. This is actually inside the fence. That's energized back there at the back. That's not good. This to me spoke volumes. This is the maintenance log for the voltage regulators in the station. So I go in, I'm going to check their maintenance logs. Every one I check will look like that. Okay? So again, I'll speak more to that in a little bit, but that pretty well tells you what you need to know about the substation maintenance program. Again, there were 5 substations, and I've got a few vegetation pictures of all of them. This one I found, I don't want to say funny, but it was, I've never seen anything like this one before. You can't tell it from this picture, but you will be able to on the next one. You see where you step up to go into the control building right outside the door. When I got there, whoever had gone in there last had to cut their way in. And that thing was 1.5 inches or whatever in diameter. When I walked into that substation building, I heard an alarm going. I tracked down the alarm, and it was a low nitrogen alarm on one of the transformers. So I go out in the field, and there actually was low nitrogen. They didn't know. They hadn't been there. That's not a good situation.
So just so we know, what's the result of a low nitrogen situation?
You get moisture in the transformer and, you know, it can cause problems. I actually found a worse one than that. The substation where the transformer had failed, you were asking about the availability, the other transformer, when I went in, the main protective device, the circuit switcher, relies on SF6 gas to operate, didn't have any. So if it had tried to operate, you would have lost the other. You'd have lost the other station, half the station. I told them, they went in there, they put some in it. It was empty, and I shouldn't be finding those things, right? So that's two instances. One could have been catastrophic. The other would have been a longer-term issue, but it just speaks to the fact that nobody goes in there, especially if you have to cut your way in. Again, this, I think I've gone to another station here. A lot of old equipment. Just, I don't know if there's value to this equipment. There's certainly, I would think, liability from an oil getting into creeks and different types of things.
Isn't the switches out on the top of that transformer?
Yeah, this whole part of the thing was just off. Yes, sir. It's been rebuilt somewhere else. Here's another set of transformers that were old ones. Here's yet another. Okay, thank you. So, yes, and just hundreds of other pieces of just normal insulators and bus work and things just laying around everywhere. This is their pole yard. This is where they are every day when they're getting transformers to go out. The ones in the back are almost completely covered. This is an example of where they store their equipment. Again, I don't know how they get work done. I mean, because they don't have the manpower, right? And so they don't have a week or two or three to go out there and just start cleaning up right now. So I get that, but you see what we're dealing with here. Take a look inside the warehouse. Just a couple of shots inside the warehouse. Lots of that type of thing. Now some things that are concerning, and are going to speak to safety. I think I got 3 or 4 more pictures, and then we'll get into the actual assessment. Their gloves laying on the ground, no protectors. Very, very, very concerning. Their personal protective equipment program is non-existent. We're going to talk about that more too. Here we got a case. The orange thing up there is, you know, is line hose or whatever. It's not supposed to be stored with things that could abrade it or cut it or puncture it. And similarly to that, you know, here we go again. Well, that was it. Okay, so, I mean, so just lots of things to look at there. And again, I'm going to circle back around to some of these pictures. Hopefully they'll stick in your mind. But what I'd like to do now is kind of go through the executive summary of the report and just walk through that. Interrupt me anytime you want to. It's going to be quite a bit. But I'm going to try to, now that I'm not going to be walking. Okay. First thing I want to say.
Catherine, do you have copies of this, the executive summary? We can figure out a way to get us a copies of it so we can follow along. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah, please continue.
Now I want to say this. Everything we just looked at, those are symptoms. Those are not the problem. Okay? So going through the executive summary, I'm going to reiterate some of what you've already heard from TVA about leadership that's needed there. That's where the problem really lies. So starting with the management side of things there, based on my observations, there is not a qualified person, either at the city or in the utility department, to hold that manager's position. They just don't exist there right now.
And they don't have a manager currently, right?
Correct.
Is that right, John? Still no? Okay. So there's no manager to kind
That's
of
correct.
oversee this?
They,
So who's running it?
the mayor,
The mayor's running the system.
yes. And there's just it's a glaring lack of knowledge about just the most basic things that a utility system manager would know. Just a couple of examples there would be just rates and how rates work and how you allocate across customer classes and these types of things and how you know, what does a 5% rate increase mean? It's easy to say, but, you know, customer charge, energy charge, demand charge, where does that go? There's no concept of that concept, if you will. Something like vegetation management, which you would think, okay, everybody understands the need to cut trees. And we'll talk about that in some detail here in a minute. You can do that well and you can do that poorly. And there's nobody there that understands how to really put a successful program together to do that well. Last one I'll mention, I wanted to know their system losses. So I could figure out maybe there's some things they could do to reduce the losses which directly impact the bottom line. I could not find anybody there that could provide me with system loss calculations. So I have no idea, TVA may know, I have no idea what the system losses are on the utility department. That's just basic stuff. Again, they're operating day to day. There's no long-term vision or planning or anything like that, you know, going on. So, and I want to speak to the employees right quick because I've said a lot here and I've shown some pictures and it could reflect poorly on them. Those guys were fantastic. They're showing me things. They were honest. They were saying, "Please tell our story." Some would say, a couple even went so far as to say, "We are embarrassed by the level of service that we're providing." You've heard it said, "We want to do better, we can do better." They're embarrassed with how they're perceived, they're frustrated with how they're perceived. They either don't have the tools, or they simply don't know how. They have not been trained. They don't know how to do the things that need to be done appropriately. So I want to make sure I say that and that everybody hears that. That is not where the fault lies. And I'm not going to assign blame, but it is not there. So back to management, I believe, as TVA has said, an experienced utility system manager is a must for Holly Springs. There's just no question about it.
How long have they been without a manager? Do you know?
I do not know.
Over a year without a manager. Thank you.
I think they ran through them pretty good too, right? I mean, they turn over quite a bit. There has been quite a bit of turnover. There is zero engineering expertise there from an electrical engineering standpoint. Additionally, and this is based on what I could glean from their website, so I could be wrong, but the consultant that the city uses has no experience in this space either. They have experience in water, wastewater, roads, that kind of stuff, which is all very legitimate for municipal, I suppose. I'm sure it is, but there's no utility management experience. There's no technical expertise on in-house, and there's no technical expertise on retainer, if you will. That is a concern. I think I think you can really look at this. This is how I've framed it in my mind. We're at the point of trying to start an electric utility from scratch. Wow. Right. That's where we are. Right. And so it's going to take someone to come in there that can put together a vision, vision statements, mission statements. I mean, starting even with that just can start the process and understand the challenges and prioritize these challenges, because they are many, and you can't do them all at once, even though 5 or 6 of them you really need to. So I think the real world experience is, it's just a must. I will say this too, there are a lot of municipal systems in the state and around where the general manager does not have that type of background, and that's fine. If you've got a well-run system, I'm not saying you have to have that. The day may come when the Holly Springs utility could promote from within, and that would be fantastic. But again, if you're trying to start from scratch, you've got to bring somebody in that knows how to do that.
One comment. Leadership starts at the top, but a true leader, from my experience in life, knows when to lead and they know when to follow. And so it seems to me that the leader doesn't know how to step out of the way, because those pictures do not need to be explained. They speak for themselves. There's so many safety concerns, especially last year we had a drought. And with all that vegetation, we know what will happen.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna move into vegetation now. Are there any questions on the management side? I think I've basically reiterated what you've heard multiple times. But
I know this may be a subjective question, but as large as that system is, how should it be structured? Or normally, what do you see in a system like that? I mean, how many linemen do you normally see? I mean, if it was functioning properly.
I'm trying to think of how big their service area is. I think they told me they had 1,600 miles of line, 12,000 customers. I mean, I know a similar size system that's probably got 18 or 20. I don't know if that's the right number or not, but the one I previously worked at, and the manager's in the room here today, he can slap me if I was really wrong, but I remember 2,000 miles of line and 15, 16,000 customers, and I know there's a lot more linemen and servicemen and all than there are at Holly Springs.
So obviously, there's no manager there, and there's only, last we heard, 4 linemen to try to maintain the system. And one of them's 87 years old.
I think they have some groundmen, but they've only got, when I was there, one of the conversations I had was that there were only 3, maybe 4 people that were qualified to work something hot. So they had some people on the ground, some young people. But yeah, it's nowhere near enough.
Okay.
Nowhere near enough.
Thank you. Continue.
Okay, on the vegetation, you've seen it, but it's just a systemic issue. It goes from their subtransmission system through the distribution system into the substations, into the office facilities. It's everywhere. Reliability is certainly being impacted, and these things are just continuing to grow. They've been without a right-of-way contractor for about 2 years, is my understanding, is that the right-of-way program was stopped. And so in that time, there was not any vegetation that was being trimmed. They do not have, the department does not have the manpower, obviously. They don't have the equipment. They don't have the expertise to safely clear that line, even if they had the time. Again, back to where I said, a lot of this vegetation is in direct contact with energized conductors. Where I was going with that is, back to this point, they've got about 3 or 4 people that are qualified to work something hot. And so it just can't happen. I think that obviously you're going to have professional line clearing companies come in and get a hold of this. Now, I think I'm right on what I'm about to say. I watched their board meetings and I heard this conversation. I think they have entered into a line clearing contract recently with a firm. I heard $3 million for 3 years of work. I do not know anything about the contract or any of that. I do fear, though, that without the leadership that needs to be in place, they're not going to get nearly the results that they should out of that expenditure. If I'm wrong about that, if the contract has not been entered into, what I'm about to say still is correct. But you have to prioritize that work, and you want to prioritize it based on something, right? You want to prioritize it based on who's having the most outages, which outages are the biggest, last the longest, whatever your metric is. They capture none of that. They have no idea how many customers are out of service. They do not document how long they're out of service, and they do not document the causes. So any prioritization that is being done is anecdotal. Depending on who you talk to, yeah, I had to go work on that line a couple of times last year, so that's one we need to go get. That's the way things, I'm afraid, are being prioritized and will be prioritized if they've entered into something like this. I couldn't even get a clear definition of what the right-of-way width is. I don't know what they're supposed to be clearing. I don't know if they're clearing overhang. I don't know if they're doing danger trees from outside the right-of-way. A successful program would have a really good communications outreach to the membership or to the customer base to let them know, we're going to be in your area. This is what we're going to be doing. There's all these elements to a vegetation management program, herbicides, tree growth regulators, all these things that you can mold into a program and do a really good job and use the best tool at the best location. And they don't have any of that. So it would be a concern to me if I was watching the money, who's managing these crews, where are they going, what are they doing? Whether they did that already or not, or whether that comes up soon, it's the same. So, let me see here. I mean, it takes a while to develop one of those programs, and that expertise does not exist at the utility or at City Hall. Not a slight on anybody. That's specific information, right? That's not everybody is wired toward that. But there's people and companies and firms out there that could help with that. So that's really what I was going to say about the vegetation. Again, the pictures do speak for themselves. So let me stop and see if there's questions specific to vegetation.
Gentlemen? I think you answered all the questions. Go ahead. You can continue. Thanks.
I want to go back to the 46 kV subtransmission now. I showed about 3 pictures of that, but the problems with the subtransmission are much more than just the vegetation. The department's got 5 substations. 4 of those receive transmission service from TVA at 161,000 volts. They're fine. The Sladen substation is served, there's 2 old 46 kV lines that the department acquired from TVA in the past, that's not uncommon, that serve that substation. The normal feed for that substation is out of the South Holly Spring Station, and 2 or 3 years ago there was a storm or something came through and that line went down. It is still down. They did not put it back in service. They said it was swampy, it was problems, whatever, I don't remember the specifics. Swampy may not be the right word, but there were problems. Anyway, it was not placed back in service at the time I was there. So they were operating this Sladen substation now out of the Coldwater substation through a crazy arrangement where you take the 161 from TVA and step it down to 13 to serve customers. Then you take that 13 and step it back up to 46, and then you transmit it over the 46, and then you step it back down to 13 with no voltage regulation anywhere in that chain.
So sorry to interrupt. So if they had a live line down on the ground, would they know it?
I don't know. The relaying and all for that is complex. I talked to the consulting firm that did it, and they said it was very unusual.
So there's a real possibility they could have a hot wire on the ground.
I can't say that. I mean, they designed a protective scheme, and there's always that possibility, but I don't know that it's any higher there than anything else, but it is unusual. The voltage is swinging probably ways it shouldn't be swinging, but the concern is if that line now goes down or goes out, there is no source of power to Sladen substation and everybody that it serves until one or the other lines are put back in service. And if it were a quick fix on that original line, they would have already fixed it, right? So it is a significant problem. They are one event away in several cases from really, catastrophic from the standpoint of where I mentioned the gas not being in the circuit switcher. That would have been a catastrophic thing if a bird had landed on the bus or something during that time.
So when you say catastrophic, what would happen?
Blow up. Yes.
And then
Explosion.
that's
And they've already had an explosion 5 years ago in
Right.
that, in the same substation. So,
yes, sir.
Next question. Our office issued an advisory to the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, sent out press releases about vegetation. And you talk about catastrophic events. It brought it back to mind that due to the drought last year, there's several pine trees across the whole state, probably 1 in 10 are dead because sap drains out. Those trees that you drive by and you'll see them brown. When a pine tree's brown, that means it's dead. So that's one wind event or ice storm event, multiplied across the whole service area of down trees that could potentially, make the whole system a complete danger immediately.
Yes.
So I believe that we need to illuminate the situation just because of how dire it is and how many people will be negatively impacted across the whole service area.
That's a good point, Commissioner, because if it's going out now in broad daylight with vegetation, what are these trees going, how are you going to address these dead trees?
Right. How you gonna deal with, down trees throughout the service area, when it's snowing and icy out there?
And we like,
Surprised it
we,
happened last week.
excuse me. We like to build redundancy into our system, right? If we lose a line, we like to have, if possible, we like to have another line we can pick it up from, shift load around, that kind of thing. And that exists on the Holly Springs system. But in a lot of cases, when the main line has gone out, it hasn't been fixed. So there are now beginning to be these pockets, and some of them are as large as the Sladen Substation service area, where you don't have the redundancy that you had anymore. So it is a significant concern. So that's what I was going to say on the sub-transmission. I think we kind of covered that. I want to get into substations in general now. Obviously, they're not doing any maintenance or routine inspections. And I've already spoken to the two cases that I found. I think now they are actually going in and taking some counter readings and doing that kind of stuff after we reviewed the assessment with the leadership at Holly Springs. But it comes back to the leadership issue and the technical expertise issue. Someone can go into the substation on that blank form that I showed you and record that that regulator operated 400 times this month. Okay, is that good? Is that bad? Does that need further study? There's nobody there that can take that information and do anything with it. Similarly, that would be the outage information, the length of outages and all that stuff. You can record it, but if somebody's not going through that and coming up with a plan and making something actionable out of it, then why bother? So, I mean, they want to do, this is a case of where they want to do. We pointed out you're not doing this. They're in there doing it now. But that's, again, that's a symptom that they're treating. It's not the real issue. They're not doing any preventative maintenance, again, on the transformers, even to the point of the insurance company will send oil testing kits free of charge. They want to test the oil and see if, combustible gases are starting to build up or anything else that might indicate a problem with the transformers. And they don't take the samples and send them back. I don't know if it's because they don't know how. I don't know what the problem is, but they're not providing that information. And so the condition of these things is unknown. And a lot of people in this room know how long it takes to get a power transformer if you have to have one. I mean, these lead times are year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't know. Since I retired a year ago, I'm not sure what the supply chain looks like right now, but I know it was a couple of years when I was still working. 3? Okay, there you go. And so just something simple that the insurance company would do for them. I mean, they would track it, trend it, point out where there's problems. That's not getting done either. There's nobody that's in charge of that. There's nobody that's responsible for that. It's not that they can't do it or wouldn't do it if somebody told them or showed them how, I don't think. They don't know how. So, I mean, that's a real concern. Again, my understanding is that there was a plan in place to rebuild the North Holly Springs substation at one time, 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know what happened with that, but I do know that there was a lot of work, circuit work that was done outside the substation. There's poles, there were no wire on them. I started asking questions, and they said that they were going to rebuild that station. That station needs to be looked at really hard. The south needs to be looked at really hard. The others, Ashland's in good shape. Ashland's a pretty good substation. But somebody with a technical background, consulting firm, engineer, somebody needs to go in there and evaluate that. The two major substations in the city, north and south Holly Springs, there's no voltage regulation there either. So they swing with TVA's transmission voltage, which is not bad, but it's not ideal. I did find, I believe it was the Ashland substation, where there were 12 or 15 single-phase regulators for the circuit. Over half of them were in either the manual or the off position, so they weren't regulating. And so you had unbalanced voltages coming out of the station. I don't know that it was outside of any limits. I don't know that, but they're not operating appropriately. So in some cases they've got the equipment and they're just turned off, and nobody really knew why or how it happened. So just speaks to, they go in the substation if they've got to do something to get the lights back on, and then they're back out because they got to go to the next thing. I mean, they're swamped. So let me stop with that too. I'm going to go into new service requests next. I'm going to kind of change gears here. If there's anything else on the power system components part that you got a question about.
Good explanation.
Okay, thank you. Their new service requests, they have a significant backlog. I heard this from people inside the company that said, you know, sometimes it takes us months to get out there to meet with the customers. There was one job when I was in the back one day with them when they were assigning the work, and they showed me the job, and the request for service was dated October of 2021. This was in September of 2023. So 1 month shy of 2 years. It was for an outbuilding. They said the guy would call every so often. He wasn't really pushing, but you know, it took him 2 years basically to get service. The more concerning thing that I heard was that they actually get to the point where people are ready to move into the houses, and it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, and they will call the department and say, we're about to lose our financing. And that's when some of them will get moved to the front of the line. When they get to the point where they can't move in and the banks are fixing to pull out from under them, that's when they can get service. So it's going to take somebody to go in there and evaluate this backlog, prioritize this backlog, bring resources in to address this backlog. Because that's not going to get better. I want to talk about their mapping just a moment, and I'm getting close to the end here. I could only find one map of their system, and it was dated 2009. So anything that's been done since 2009 is not reflected on the map. There were some proposed projects on that map that were not completed, so it's not correct anyway. So you know, that's a little bit of an issue, but there's nothing that these workers can rely on to show them how things are configured in real time. And so, you know, you get called out on an outage, you'll switch the feeds around, and you'll have to leave it abnormal for some reason so you can come back during the daylight and fix something else. You got all the lights back on, but you've got the system switched a little differently than normal. And they don't really have a good way that I could see to relay that information. So you get somebody the next day goes out in the same area and is expecting this line to feed from here, and it actually feeds from there. That's a concern. I mean, I think that's a pretty common thing. They don't have any way to know which way the feeds are from and that kind of thing in any kind of real time. They also, let me see. Oh, that wasn't it. So I want to go to, oh, no.
I'll proceed. Yep, sorry, go ahead. Yes, sir.
We're your guest. Metering, there's serious metering and billing issues in the department. Their metering system, they have an advanced metering system, but it's older. It was not very robust enough from a communications architecture standpoint when it was put in. It's degraded over time, and as I talked to the metering guy, he says we get about 75% maybe out of this. They invested a lot of money into that. You like to use your advanced metering infrastructure also to help you pinpoint outages, right? So ideally, you can ping these meters, send a signal to these meters, and they'll report back if we've got power or not, and you know extensive outages. There's things you can do with that. And he told me, yeah, we can do that, but he said it may take an hour for it to come back. And we tried to ping some meters, and you just couldn't get much of a response. So they have some real challenges there. Also, they've got one guy that understands that metering system. My thing I say, if he gets hit by a bus, they got a problem. Because he's the only, and he knows it, he's sharp, but he's the only thing they've got. So you've got that issue where the meters are not reporting right. They don't report consistently, I'll say. And here's a case where I am going to make a comment that I heard this. I didn't, it's more anecdotal maybe, but a lot of reports of customers that don't get bills for months, or they're not right. So I don't know what part the metering infrastructure plays in that, which metering infrastructure is what I was more concerned with. But obviously, you know, customers got to have confidence that they're going to get billed accurately and timely. And I don't think that exists there. There's no plan, okay? And characterize it in the summary as a long-range technology and operational plan, but basically, let's just talk about the metering just a second. There were discussions while I was there about changing that metering system out to, I think they said something that Verizon had. I don't know if that's a good idea. It may be a great idea. I don't know. But there's no thought been put into what other systems, what other things do we need to do that the metering infrastructure, the communications infrastructure for the meters could be a part of something else, a SCADA system or whatever going forward. There's been no planning to look at that. Everything is kind of, we're working on this, so let's just deal with this. We're working on this, let's deal with this. There's no effort to pull things together and really look at them holistically. It just goes back to the general manager, the leadership, the technical leadership, that type of thing that is needed there. There's also no electric system planning. That map from 2009 was part of the last system plan that was done. So you do those system plans to see where you have voltage issues. You do those to see where lines need to be reconductored, where they may be overloaded, all these types of things. They haven't done one in 15 years now. You know, you need a consultant engineering firm to do something like that. They exist. They're doing it for us every day. But they have not done anything like that. So they really don't know what condition the system's in. Where are the weak parts? If we did lose and have to refeed from a different direction, what's the capability of the substation transformer to carry that load? No, nobody knows. And so it would just be try and hope, try and hope. The last thing I want to mention is safety. And not because it's the least important, but I think because it's the most important. And I did not do the in-depth safety assessment. Some of the things that I'm going to mention here were brought out by the safety team, but I did observe most of this. Just things like a job briefing. You roll up on a job with a crew, your crew leader is supposed to sit down and give instruction. Look at the hazards involved, look at how we're going to produce the work, where's the feed coming from, that sort of thing. Ideally, that's documented and reviewed. The safety team witnessed 2 4-man crews pull up on a job and start work with 8 men, and no safety briefing was held, and that's the norm. I mean, there's some stuff, go there and get this, go over there and get this, but no real sit down and let's understand the dangers that we're about to dive into here on this job. So that's a huge concern, and one that's not difficult to correct, right? If somebody is trained appropriately to do that. They don't have a written hazard communication program, so your MSDS, that type of compliance. No written program for that. That's all I'll say about that. The personal protective equipment. I showed you gloves. I showed you things. According to the safety guys, they really are not even aware that you're supposed to rotate these gloves out on a certain interval, or that you're supposed to test these gloves every day before you put them on to make sure that they don't have leaks in them. They don't do that. I don't know how long some of these people may use the same set of gloves. I mean, that's what keeps them going home at night, is those gloves. So that's a real concern. It's the same with their line hose. It's the same with their sleeves, all of their personal protective equipment. And even where they had it, they were caught, I won't say caught, they were observed using the wrong voltage level for the work they were doing, or not using personal protective equipment at all when it was required, that kind of thing. That goes back to training. Again, because you know these guys are not out there intentionally with a death wish, right? I mean, they're going to protect themselves and each other if they know how. Written switching procedures. When you are going out there and you're changing the configuration of the system, you have to do that in certain steps, and you have to do them in a certain order, or you can really mess up, and they don't do any of that. Ideally, you would have somebody that was experienced write these switching orders, and then you'd hand them off to somebody else who's experienced to verify that they're correct. They don't do anything like that. So, again, you can miss one step, and you can kill somebody. You can't. And the last thing I've got here, no documented program either about inspections of their fleet, whether that be the digger derricks, the trenchers, the backhoes, their trucks, the aerial devices themselves, the bucket trucks that are mounted on the chassis. No program for any of that either, which obviously there's safety concerns with that as well. And in the report, you'll see a lot of pictures of things on the trucks that are wrong, that are bad. I didn't share those pictures. So, you know, I said this wasn't an exhaustive list, and it's not, but y'all are probably exhausted. So, you know, I've covered a lot. I tried to do it organized somewhat, but they overlap so much. I do just want to say, before I say thank you, is that it comes back to the leadership issue again. That is the number one thing that's got to be addressed. From that, you're going to need 3, 4, 5 years, you know, to really turn things around. And I don't speak to the money side or any of that. I don't know any of that stuff. But you've got to have somebody in there to get this going, and it's going to take some time. It can be fixed, but it's going to take some effort. So with that, you know, thank you. I'm happy to clarify anything that you might want. And other than that, I conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Jim. Y'all heard, appreciate you with your presentation. Gentlemen, y'all have any questions? Any question?
Thank you for
Again, thank
presenting.
you. And again, it sounds like that if you did have a catastrophic failure, like we were talking about that substation, you had an explosion, I mean, theoretically, how many people would be out of power, and how long would it take to get that thing back up?
Well,
Right.
yeah.
And how many fatalities out of something like that?
Well, it would be in the thousands of customers, because there's 2 substations that feed the city, and there's 4,000 customers, I think, in the city. So, you know, you're going to lose half of that and try to feed it from the other substations. You may not have the capacity to do that, where you've got that one transformer that's been out of service for 5 years. It may be a simple fix. It may be okay. I don't know that anybody ever looked at it. And I couldn't untank it there and look at it. I wouldn't know. But yeah, it's a concern. And every day that you go on in this day-to-day mode, here's another area over here that's a little more susceptible to an event that might not have been previously, because we made this change. And that cycle's got to end.
So there's no preemptive maintenance on a lot of it. It's just reactionary.
Yes.
And selective, yeah. I do have one other question. So is the system, most of the vegetation, or most of where is the biggest deficiency? Is it south, in the city and the county? Where is it at?
Yes.
All of it? Okay.
Seriously,
No.
seriously, and it varies. There's kudzu in places where you might go 8 or 10 poles and there not be anything, and then it's covered with kudzu, and then you go 8 or 10 poles and it's covered with kudzu, but there's no trees growing up into it, if you will. Then you get into other areas where, like as you saw, the trees are wrapped up in it. I saw some areas where there was a bamboo that was up to about the neutral. Bamboo grows fast. So that's going to get away from them. So it's everywhere, and it's different in different places. And again, I never got off the main roads, so I don't know what it looks like when you start getting into some of these more rural areas off the main roads.
We have a few pictures. I know we didn't share them, it wasn't in your report, but just from some of the citizens in the community, there's a very robust magnolia tree. It's not a young tree, and the power lines are going through that tree. That's substantial. If that tree goes down, then obviously the whole thing goes down. But anyway, appreciate your presentation, and appreciate the work you've done to try to help the citizens of the HSUD.
Thank you.
Thank you. From here, we'll have any kind of closing comments from the commissioners. Commissioner Stamps?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's disheartening to see this level of ineffective governance. Maybe this question is to you or to the other state reps and senators in the room. Have we looked at changing the form of government for the city as a whole? Because if the utility district is at this level of unacceptable governance or leadership, the same thing probably happens in the police department, the fire department, public works, other areas of city leadership. Have we looked at that? Because it seems that, I'm a big proponent of the council manager form of government, where you hire a competent city manager to run the city, and you take the, per se, politics out of it. You hire somebody, and that person in turn hires competent professionals to run the other departments, versus having a relationship-based governance where you elect a mayor and a board of aldermen, and they elect people, or they hire people that they are personally related to or personally have relationships with, that may not have the appropriate level of competency to function those duties. So have we looked at something like that for this city? Because the governance of this city affects other cities around it and the citizens that live in the county as well. I know it's not a popular
Representative
thing.
Faulkner has. I'm okay. Yes, sir.
I don't
It's on.
I don't think so. I mean, not to my knowledge, I don't think that there's been any discussion that I'm aware of changing the form of government.
To me, that would be the cheapest solution. The other solutions, do you take the people who live outside the city and put them underneath some other structure of something? But then can the utility function off the people who live in the city by itself? And what's the quality of that service versus other things? So there are a lot of decisions that we made based on what we were presented with today, maybe not by specifically just our portion, but other government entities are looking at this. But we need to have an immediate solution, probably recommend something to the governor's office in MEMA to at least get us through the wintertime, to be preemptive just in case something major happens over the course of the next few months.
If I could make a comment, when you look at everything that has been presented today, what is common is when you look at leadership, and leadership matters, and when you look at cooperation, and what spirit you work in, and elections have consequences. So I don't know if changing the form of government, would that be considered something, made in a haste, because we have what we have today? The people of Holly Springs, they made a choice, and this is what we have right now. So that's why I made the statement earlier about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, these issues can be fixed. And as has been said today, we got some really hardworking folks in Holly Springs who really care about this. And I would add that I am one of the people who's sitting here today that is embarrassed to see that this is my hometown. This is where I was born and raised. I love that city. And to sit here and some of these things I've seen today I wasn't even aware of. So to have to sit through this and watch this is really disheartening. I agree with you, and it's embarrassing to me as a citizen of that city. So I'm open and ready to work with whoever to try to get something done. But I want us to, I want an all-hands-on-deck approach to get this done. Nobody working in silos, coming out with a plan to fix, you know, my hometown and sit in the place I represent. So I just think that in the thought process of looking at a solution going forward, I think we need to work that way. Everybody involved having a seat at the table to try to come up with some type of viable solution that can help our folks back home. Thank you.
You know, the process for changing the form of government takes an act from the legislature to put it on the ballot, and then during the November election for president, the citizens in that city would in turn vote to change the form of government. Then the Board of Aldermen would redraw lines based on how many Board of Aldermen they choose in the future. And then in the 2025 election, municipal officers will get elected based on the new form of government. Then they will in turn basically redo the whole city. You would basically have to take each department and redo all the processes, just everything. And it gives the local municipality the ability to go fix itself versus someone else fixing it for them. And that's why I said that course is probably the lowest hanging fruit, but the other things that could potentially happen just run the gamut. And sometimes when decisions are made outside of the utility for folks inside the utility, then they may not be abreast of all of the unintended consequences of some of the decisions that are proposed. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's very disheartening. I'm disappointed because elections do have consequences, but everybody elected, no matter if you're white or black, people have paid a price to get you the ability to be able to be elected, and you should do your daggum job. Yeah. I mean, you should hold that to a level of seriousness. And when it comes to utilities, these are people's lives. People are going to die without power. Literally, people will die. People are out there on oxygen machines and all kinds of stuff out there. And if they can't have reliable power, I mean, we're putting people in poverty. I mean, I talked to some of these people online when I was watching those videos. I was messaging folks who were commenting, and it was just really, I felt bad as a government official. I wasn't even on the Public Service Commission at the time, back in the summertime. And just to see that, talk to folks who were having these issues is just disheartening.
And if you do go online and watch that, the public input part, the part that you take away is that the community comes together.
Right.
Doesn't matter what you look like. Right. Doesn't matter which party that you ascribe to. Everybody's suffering equally. And so that's why we're here, is to try to figure out how to fix this problem. And again, as we've noticed today, it didn't happen overnight, but it is in dire straits. It is in bad shape. And there's seemingly lack of leadership in the city now to do anything, even as simple as hiring a manager that can help address these issues. So it is a breakdown of leadership, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioner, and I'm glad that we had this hearing, and the purpose of this hearing is to make sure people understood what's going on. Again, not to throw rocks, not to try to cast aspersions, but to say, hey, this is dire. The people are suffering. People, literally, they testified to us that one of the undertakers said, when our power goes off, we can't even maintain the dignity of those that are deceased. We don't think about that in other parts of the state. We don't think about that, and it's a shame, Representative Faulkner and Commissioner Stamps and Commissioner Carr, that's happening in Mississippi, that we have those concerns. That if you're on a medical machine that is maintaining your life, you have to be in fear whether the power is going to be on tomorrow in a broad daylight, not an ice storm. And again, This is not a gotcha moment. This is to say, hey, this is an issue and we have to join together to fix it, because the people in that district deserve better. Commissioner Carr?
First, I want to bring something out about those four gentlemen that are doing their level best to keep the system up as best they can. Some of the pictures that I've seen in there, I know they're doing their best. They're taking very, very severe risks that they only have one time. And I've seen what happens when they take that risk. Personally, it's not a good position to be in. The part about the glove, the gentleman brought up about the safety gloves. Yes, they're supposed to be tested. Sometimes if you're driving down the road and you see a crew and they're in an emergency position where we've had a crisis, an emergency, you'll see their boom truck sticking up in the air. A lot of people don't know what that's for. That's to see if it's going to leak down. You know, they're testing that equipment on their own. And some of those pictures that were there, I didn't see any of that. He brought up about the testing. That's a very important safety issue. They're my neighbors. I live in Gulfport, Mississippi. I'm 7 or 8 hours from them, but they're my neighbors, and I'm concerned about them. And I think every person in this room is concerned about them. And, you know, Commissioner Stamps mentioned about the elderly. Part of my career, I worked in the healthcare facilities, and I've seen what happens when a generator doesn't function correctly. People that are in the hospitals or nursing homes or daycares, it concerns me. Also, it concerns me on the water side. When you lose pressure and it gets below 20 PSI, you can have infiltration into that water line. It's something we don't think about when we lose power. Power is very important. Communication is very important. To have a plan is very important. And they're right, it's going to take some time. We've got to start somewhere. But the can has to stop being kicked. We've got to start. Everybody's got to come to the table. My Bible says that there is wisdom in a multitude of counsel. We have a lot of counsel in this room today. And there's a lot of counsel outside of this room that we're going to have to rely on. We alone cannot do this. We have to have help. Y'all brought it to our attention. We're going to do what we can. They're our neighbors. Thank y'all for making your presentation today.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Commissioner Stamps had a few more comments.
Just one question. What are the rates for the Holly Spring Utility District? What are the ratepayers paying for the service that they're getting?
Do we know what the kilowatt hour cost there?
Or somebody just send it to me later on, I guess.
Certainly can follow up. I don't have it offhand, but I will say that they haven't adjusted their local rates since like 2009. So, but we'll follow up with the specifics of what their rates are today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, gentlemen? Mr. Peters, you had some comments?
I just want to say, and I was remiss for not making this part of my initial comments, TVPPA really appreciates the opportunity to present the findings. This is the first time we've had an opportunity to do it in a public setting. We thought it was important to get it out there. I should have said thank you first, and it just occurred to me I didn't say thank you, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. And again, thank you for working with us. And we can't say anything else. Thank y'all so much for what you're doing. But our commitment is to, as Commissioner Carr said and Commissioner Stamps has echoed, those Mississippians are all Mississippians are our neighbors. And we are here to help defend our neighbors. So our commitment is to try to see this through and try to come to a resolution to our best of our ability. And so with that, thank y'all very much for coming. God bless. Have a good day. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Stamps said, anybody have any comments? Yes, sir.
My name's Scott Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Tom Bigby Electric Power. I'm around Tupelo. I don't touch Holly Springs. But in February of '23, we were called upon to help them with their ice storm outage. That was a very difficult decision. We were called upon by the governor's office. We were called upon by the Public Service Commission. And we initially had to say no. The reason we had to say no is everything Mr. Sugg told you. We know there's a lack of a map. We know there's a lack of a safety system. I believe other utilities have helped in the past, and the lines have been attempted to be energized with crews working down the line. Certainly there was a financial concern to my ratepayers and my members about could we be reimbursed. That was the last thing on our mind. We were concerned about could we be safe. We refused to help until there was some arm twisting in the city and outsiders, Northeast Power, was put over the repair efforts. So I just want to reiterate, these safety concerns touch the crews at Holly Springs immeasurably. They face it every day, but if there's an outage, if we have the catastrophic event or the failure of the substation that Mr. Suggs talked about, getting help is going to be difficult. I know I speak for, because we all talked in February of '23, who can help. Some of us were brave enough to do it after we had some control over the job. The mayor was very nice to me at the time. She called, she asked, she begged, and I had to tell her no. I've never been in a position for my co-op not to help another utility. We've been to all the states in the Southeast. We've never refused a request. That hurt to have to refuse that request. We were happy to help when we could after those steps were taken. But just be aware, if there's a catastrophic outage, and you're called upon by the citizenry of the area to say, hey, PSC, can you help us get help for these people? That is what's going through our mind. That's our perspective and what we have to be concerned about. And that's secondary to the citizenry that they need the systems, the repairs that need to be made, and the safety for the employees, Commissioner Carr. You're exactly right. But I wanted you to hear our perspective as well as someone that would come to help and has come to help. It's a tremendously bad situation from our perspective as well. And we're there to help if we can, but only if we're safe. Thank you.
And that's complete. Thank you for your comments, and that's completely understandable. And as I think, as we heard from the presenter, that this is one out of 153 that's having this issue, and safety is the utmost. I mean, like Commissioner Carr said, and like Commissioner Stamp said, you cannot risk your life out there in unsafe conditions. So again, thank you for your comments. Anybody else have any comments? Senator Chisholm.
I do have a couple last comments here. As you probably know, last year there was a resolution brought to the floor because the deadline on bills had already passed. The resolution was brought to the floor to try to help the problem in Holly Springs, and it was killed, and that's water under the bridge. I want to let everybody in here know that I appreciate everything that everybody in this room is doing to help Holly Springs. You just don't know how much flack we have gotten off of this problem. Every time I've called TVA, they have been spot on, immediately took care of the problem. I sincerely appreciate that because I had received several calls and the problem just continued to exist day after day after day, and I would call to TVA and immediately they were on it. They're doing everything they can. And I want to personally thank Mr. Bill Maddox, who is in this room. He went above and beyond to help us. He would let me know that he had trucks headed that way, and then they would get turned down. They would be sent back to New Albany by the mayor of Holly Springs. So I just want to thank everybody in here. I don't want anybody to think that I'm pointing fingers, because there are those in this room that are trying really, really hard to help. And I appreciate the three of you bringing this meeting together, because this has been needing to be done for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chisholm. Thank you, Senator Chisholm. And again, thanks to to all that help our neighbors in need in that area. So Bill Maddox is one of them. Thank you, Mr. Maddox. Anybody else? Again, thank you all so much for everything you're doing. Thank you, TVA and TVPPA, and everybody that's here. And with that, God bless and have a good day.
It was nicer than me.